Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also support the show by visiting thebittertruth.info and get some fabulous swag there to make your life better. So if you don't want to be a patron or a subscriber, you can at least get a t-shirt or a book or what have you. I'm excited. Today, speaking to a gentleman named JT Chapman. I got in him maybe a few months ago. He hosts a show on YouTube and other platforms we're going to actually be discussing a little bit later in the show, I'm sure. Called Second Thought. And if you've not caught his videos, I've not seen anything, quite frankly, that is as compact, information dense, and like just really easy to watch. Great flow. If you want to, some people tell me, I don't have time to study all this stuff. His videos are nothing short of phenomenal. And I was genuinely excited when he agreed to come on the show and chat with us today. How you doing, JT?
Hey, Abe, doing well. Thanks for that glowing introduction there.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan. I forward your stuff to people all the time. So yeah, and then I want to talk to you more about your other platforms that you guys use as well, because I know that you guys are getting you pretty much demonetized on YouTube for the most part, or no?
Yeah, a lot of the time, yeah. It's a challenge to be sure.
Sure. Well, hey man, listen, I know we emailed back and forth a little bit, and I think a great way to kind of launch into what I wanted to talk to you about. Because your point in one of the emails was leftists versus liberals, and I can't think of a better example than, say, Van Jones, who on election night was crying about a white lash. 4 months later, was saying that the president looks presidential for bombing Syria, and then now he's excited that the guy who wrote the crime bill is president. Now he knows what he can tell his son. Is that about the dichotomy that the so-called liberal runs, and then they're left,
Oh yeah, pretty much. To me, it really boils down to the liberals and kind of the pundit class are all about aesthetic victories. So, you get someone like Barack Obama into the presidency, and yes, that's the first and it's historical and all that. But if the material realities of normal people don't change, that's not a victory. That's just, that's team sports. So, like Joe Biden, like you were saying, architect of the crime bill, the material outcome of him becoming president, even though he's a Democrat and hailed as, the antidote to the last 4 years, the material realities of people are not going to get any better. And they may, in fact, even get worse. So the easiest way to sum it up for me is that the left is concerned primarily with the material conditions of actual people's actual lives versus the identity politics and the aesthetic victories that the liberals are after.
Right. Well, and then to that point too, I think one of the big challenges that I've got coming into this, and I'm sure this is not lost on you. It's lost on a lot of my Chewy Blue friends, however, is that these aesthetic victories that you're talking about. We're going to be going back to sleep again. I think. They're ignoring his cabinet picks. His cabinet picks are a bunch of right-wing corporate war hawks, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been watching as one by one all of the positions get filled by Uber executives, Lyft executives. You got Chase executives, all these people on the transition team, for example. And you're like, look, the Democrats are supposed to be against, this sort of thing, this kind of this corporate manhandling of political life. And yet there's really no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats right now. They're both entirely beholden to these massive multi-billion-dollar corporations.
Right.
And it's very frustrating to watch.
Well, it is. And then, Kamala Harris, when she got nominated for VP, private prison stocks went up.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I was supposed to be excited that, we made history because a black woman is on a major ticket. I'm like, well, to quote Danny Haiphong, that's like commending, us conquering the ethnocentric hiring practices of the mafia.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen the meme. It's a single panel meme of somewhere in the Middle East. You see a drone up above and it's dropping bombs.
Yeah.
And the guy says, they say that the next bombs will be sent by a woman. It's like,
yeah,
it about encapsulates it. It's like this is the reality of when you elect someone that's a war hawk like this.
Right.
It may be a woman or whoever, but if these people are still getting bombed, what kind of a victory is that?
Right. Well, and then, okay, and to your point, because I think anyone listening to this show that is going to label themselves a liberal, I think they would resent the idea that we don't think they're on the left.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so why is it that there's this schism in the psyche of the so-called liberal in this country? I mean, I would say the American left, but honestly, the American left to me is dead. It's not. We have a dead left. There's not anything particularly,
Yeah. Well, let me start definitely by saying I don't want to alienate anybody. A lot of people on the left were liberals beforehand, and I think that's just a very small step eventually that you might not even notice when you become actually a part of the left. But I think we do share a lot of values in common, leftists and liberals. We do care about, universal human rights. That's very important.
Sure.
But the main difference is that whereas American liberals are still willing and happy to operate under a capitalist system, the left makes the distinction of saying, no, these aren't problems that are happening, that just so happen to be happening under capitalism. The problem is inherent to the capitalist structure. So whereas the liberals might say, these problems they stem from bad actors or bad policies. And if we can just do incremental reform and uproot these problem individuals, the system can function as it should. Whereas the left would say, no, these problems that we're seeing are indicative of the capitalist system operating as it was intended. This is the only way capitalism operates. These are, it's a feature, not a bug.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, and then me and I understand your sympathy, or not sympathy, but your sentiment of, not wanting to alienate anybody. But I'm kind of at this point in my life, especially the last few years, because I've got friends kind of all over the map. And what I see with my more people who identify as liberal folks is that they will say, well, Medicare for all is a bad strategy. The Democrats have to beat Trump. And I'm like, okay, in the meantime, we got people dying and going bankrupt, right? Because the capitalist privatized system doesn't work. It fails. It fails horrendously. So how is it that we can, I heard somebody the other day say, they forgave Biden his sins, that, well, the crime bill was a mistake.
Yeah.
Well, or, which he finally said a week and a half before the election because he's a prick. So, he was bragging about it for 28 years and then finally came out and said, well, I guess it was a mistake. But how is it that we can have that arrogance? Because it's really, the crime wasn't done to me. The wrong wasn't done to me. Right. I work, I have insurance. Right. So I guess I'm fine. But, I can't sit there and just say, because I'm fine, that I can afford incremental change watching most of the country or a large part of the country suffer under these conditions.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In America, we tend to have a very, U.S. centric, U.S. only perspective. Like very few people are even aware that universal healthcare is incredibly common in the rest of the developed world. It's not like it wouldn't be some beyond the pale change to implement a system that takes care of everybody.
Right.
We're actually the only one of the industrialized nations that does not offer a humane healthcare system. Ours is entirely predatory and entirely for profit. The fact that you can't call an ambulance and be taken to a hospital, even just getting there is going to cost you $800 to $1,000. That to me is such a damning indictment of the system that we have. It's breaking every rule that you think healthcare should stand for. It's like, first do no harm, right? That's the oath they take. But if you can't even afford to get on the ambulance to get to then proceed to get treated, that's doing a hell of a lot of harm.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, you can't afford it. If you're going to go bankrupt, you're going to lose your house. Right. Think how many people decide, no, I'm not going to call an ambulance because I know I can't afford it.
Right.
That's insane to me. And the fact that we have so few politicians who are willing to say, this is a moral outrage, we need to do something about this, shows just how far gone, just how far to the right our political experience has shifted.
Right. Well, I've been kind of paraphrasing an old Noam Chomsky quote because he says he takes too long to say it, but the Democrats became Republicans and the Republicans became insane.
Yeah.
And that's because we're a right-wing country now.
absolutely.
And people get mad when I say that. I mean, because if you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, and I don't think anything materially is going to change with a Biden presidency, but if you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, aside from the identity issues that a couple that you named, I mean, I'm for human rights. Who's not for human rights?
Right.
Right. If I line up 1 million moms in this country, and I said that 100,000 people in Venezuela have died because of sanctions, and I think it's like 65% of them were kids under 15.
Yeah.
I don't think any of those moms, Jew, Presbyterian, Republican, Democrat, whatever, would be cool with that.
Yeah.
They would be horrified. They would be, oh my God, that's terrible, right? It would be like the kids in cages, right? And so, but yet, anytime there's when Bolivia went down last year, when we started screwing around with Venezuela again, I have people with a straight face go, well, Maduro was in there for 15 years. That's an awful long time. And I'm like, well, gee, Angela Merkel's been there for 15 years. I don't see us cooing Germany.
Yeah. We're so invested in the way that we've done things for, X period of time is the only way things can be done. We've done, if you count the most recent, completely flopped coup in Venezuela, I think that makes 59 attempted coups or, succeeded ones that were carried out with the help of the CIA or with the knowledge of the CIA
sure.
or U.S. government. And so we're so used to that any kind of shift would seem unnecessary. I think most Americans are generally okay with the way things are going because they're not personally affected. And we're just so against change at this point that there's nothing we can do to kind of remove that mental block that people have, that there could be anything better, that a better world could be built, and that we're not just currently living in, the end of history. Like we've reached the final point and we can go no further. Right. And I think that's a real challenge in the States to overcome that.
Well, and then I guess, back to the main point, the difference between a liberal and someone on the left. I don't understand why people on the right don't like liberals. Aside from the gays, guns, and abortion. That's really about it. Yeah. Those are the big three. Other than that, hey, if you look at MSNBC or if you look at Fox News, they are for war. They are for not telling us or for telling us we can't have healthcare. And I think I'm a little bit older than you. I went to college for free. So it wasn't like I won a pony. When I got out of school in 1987 and I was paying $100 a quarter to go to my old college. And my buddy's son who graduated last year from my same school paid $6,000 a quarter to go to that school. So my entire degree cost $3,000, the whole thing, with books, right? And books were more expensive than my cousin, who's older than me, went to UCLA for $5 a quarter.
Wow.
And then he graduated and went to UCLA Law for $5 a quarter. Because in the UC charter, it says that no student shall pay tuition. Yeah. So I guess they call it a service charge, like they call it the $5, because now to go to UCLA, it ain't $5 a quarter anymore.
No.
And this is within my lifetime. I mean, this is, I was about, I think, 12, 15 or 13 when he was in college. He's about 10, 12 years older than I am. But he went to UCLA Law for $5 a quarter. So it's just like, it's amazing. And so it's not like I want a pony. So when people say, oh, it'd be a shit show, liberals, people on the liberal side will tell me it would be a shit show if we were to do, free college.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's anyway.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because you do have the aesthetic differences between the Republicans and the Democrats, the conservatives and the liberals. And it usually just comes to cultural signifiers, like you said, abortion and guns and things like that. But the two have such a sympathetic, symbiotic relationship with each other. Like you will have a Republican get into office. The Democrats will, do the whole song and dance, but concede on almost every point to the Republicans. And then when it comes time for another election, you'll have the Democrats run somebody who is more similar to the Republican that beat them in the last election cycle.
Right.
And they're so each time they're inching closer and closer to where the Republicans were the last cycle. So it's just the Republicans get to set the pace. They get to say, all right, these are our core things now. And the Democrats will say, well, maybe let's not go that far. Let's pull back a little bit. And so with each successive Democratic presidency, we're not getting anything done. We're just trying to peel back a little bit of the hyper-capitalist instincts and policies that the Republicans have put in place. And I think we've reached a point now where we're just so far to the right that the two parties really are just two wings of the same party, and that's the corporatist capitalist party.
Sure.
And so really any differences right there, they just come down to, personal preference. It's a sports team. Do you vote for the blue team or the red team?
Right.
And nothing significant will change. The Republicans will get what they want. The Democrats will say, well, we're the party of moderation and we're going to not let them go that far. But, over time, we go that far and we never go back the other direction.
No, we don't. And to that point, and the so-called conservative, because I don't think we have conservatives anymore, frankly. The Republican is to the conservative as the Democrat is to the liberal. It's just one big corporatocracy. Mm-hmm. But I'll have my friends on the right decry socialism. And they'll say things like, well, it's crony capitalism that we're against. We don't like what's been going on with the oligarchs. Okay. Do you understand yourself that you're a worker bee? No one's going to come take your shit. No one's going to take your house. Not going to raise your taxes. I mean, if we had Medicare for all, your taxes would go up 0.2%.
Yeah.
0.3%. I know for a fact, because this is my wheelhouse, you would save thousands of dollars, some families into the 5 figures a year for just your premium. Not counting the copays or the times that the insurance companies deny things. They come back and say, "Oh, we miscoded that. That stint was an experiment because you didn't use this model. You used this model, so we're labeling it as an experiment. So you owe us $85,000." And this is where the bankruptcies come from. So when I hear the capitalists or the wannabe capitalists tell me that socialism is bad, they really can't tell me why it's bad. Mm-hmm. And yet the Democrats will agree with that assessment. I've seen Nancy Pelosi dodder on and say, "Well, we're capitalists. We're not socialist. We're a capitalist country." And then I watched John Kasich the other day. He's part of the Biden transition team, and he's frankly saying, that the Democrats now have to come to the other half of the country. Whereas when the Republicans win, they don't say that. They say, "Fuck you, we got the country."
Oh, exactly. That's part of the concessions I was just mentioning. It's like the Democrats are so spineless that they will just cave to every single thing that the Republicans want. Like in this last election cycle, you saw the Lincoln Project. These anti-Trump Republicans come together, and what did they do? They fleeced the Democrats for millions and millions of dollars, which of course they're going to go now spend on, Tucker Carlson for president 2024 or something like that.
Right.
And it's so frustrating to watch because you'll have people like Pelosi and Biden and Kasich, and they'll all say like, "Look, we won this by a narrow margin because we weren't moderate enough." And we're like, "Are you kidding?" I mean, look at the policies on the left that poll so incredibly well. Like even universal healthcare, 70% on that Fox News poll on the night before the election. That's incredible, that kind of support. Right. You've got policies like the legalization of marijuana and stuff like that. It's like 80, 90% support.
Right.
Or 70% with independents, things like that. They're just not willing to admit that there is a sea change going on in the United States, and they're just desperately trying to hold on to their kind of radical centrist oligarchic monopoly here. It's a two-party corporate duopoly that we're dealing with. And they're I don't know when it's going to shatter, but it can't keep going like this with the will of the people almost entirely opposed to those in power.
Well, it's not going to come by just voting.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And I mean, and then Donna Shalala, I just watched her on some interview, I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago. And she was saying that the problem, why the Democrats did so bad in Congress was because, if they had more centrist messages, they would have won. I'm like, didn't you just lose? You just lost. I mean, they always get like Donna Shalala or Claire McCaskill, some idiot who just lost. It's like, you fucking lost.
Yeah.
And now you're going to tell me how the next guy can win by being more Republican light than you were?
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
There was a whole slate, I think 112 Medicare for All co-sponsors were on the ballot.
Right.
All but like one of them won. Like if you supported Medicare for All, you were elected. If you opposed it, you most likely lost.
Lost your seat. That's right.
Yeah. And to me, that is so indicative of the problem. It's like, if you can't admit that your candidates are losing because they don't support these incredibly popular policies,
Right.
what's the deal?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. Well, it does make sense. I mean, they're holding on to the power as much as they can, but
Right.
it shouldn't be the way that it is.
Sure. Well, see, and then to that point, I think the thing that really frustrates me is when you're talking to people on the liberal side. I really won't say left, but people on the liberal side that are more corporate. They're corporate Democrats. They thought Hillary Clinton was super duper. They thought Biden was super duper. And I'll ask them. I said, well, listen. So more people since this is the most people we've had since 1900, since McKinley against Bryan. That's the last time we had this. This many people show up per capita, or whatever you want to call it. And yet, you guys couldn't take the Congress. You barely squeaked this thing out, right? They had to cheat the primaries again to get Biden the nomination. And then it just became an anti-Trump vote because you couldn't really point to one thing Biden was for that you are for.
Yeah.
He's still going to fuck with Venezuela. He's going to increase defense. He's not going to end fracking. He's still going to be in the Middle East. So what gives? He may get back into the Iran deal, and that's a maybe. And even if he does, Iran would be stupid if they just said, yeah, we'll take the same deal. I think they're going to, demand that it goes to a vote to the Congress to make it a law and not like something that the president, the next right-wing Yahoo can get out of, right? It just frustrates me that they can't admit that they had there's no clear mandate other than we don't like Trump. The orange man is mean. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
It really was. It was just orange man bad. And that was compelling to a lot of people because, I mean, it's been a pretty rough 4 years. I mean, Trump was obnoxious and brash and very outspoken, but he wasn't worse than someone like Bush, I would say, Bush Jr. I think Bush Jr. did a lot more lasting harm than Trump did. Trump was just more obvious in his, he was a crass, TV star, and that he did his thing. He did his populist shtick, and that was that. But I think the problem is if the Democrats can only run candidates as a, hey, we're not this guy kind of vote, they're never going to get anything accomplished. And I think maybe they're starting to realize that is their goal for the rest of eternity. Yeah. Their whole existence is based on, we're not the other guy. Get us in power for 4 years. We'll put all our fail sons in government and let them run, social media campaigns and stuff. And we'll let you, quote, get back to normal for 4 years until the next awful populist comes along and sweeps us.
Right. And I think it's going to get worse. I think it's going to get worse. I think because the pussy hats are already in mothballs. That's a fact. Brunch dates are being made. You didn't push him to the left before. You gave him your vote willingly, right? Yeah. I think people think political theory is watching MSNBC because of all the pretty colors. And, they listen to Rachel Maddow or Chris Hayes, and they just listen to that. And I can tell because I hadn't watched cable news in a very long time. And then a couple of years back when I started doing this show, I was like, well, I guess I better do my homework because I better listen to what these people are saying. So I'll watch Fox News or whatever, maybe 15, 20 minutes a week. I really can't handle it much past that. Emotionally, I get kind of angry, and I already have temper issues. I mean, I'm not, this might be betraying my age, but did you see that movie, The Chicago 7 on Netflix?
Yeah.
I threw my back out. I was so angry. I threw my back out. I have issions. I had to go to a chiropractor, and because I was like screaming at the TV. I'm sure my neighbors were like, dude, what the hell is your problem? But no, it's just so frustrating to listen to this and then be told with a straight face, you hate Trump, but you're cool with his Bolivian policy. You hate Trump, but you're cool with Venezuela. You hate Trump, but you are justifying murdering a general in Iran. And they had patience. I mean, because they could have really done some stuff. And but you're cool with escalating a possible war in Iran at the behest of who? The Saudis and the Israelis?
Yeah.
Because they're happy and peppy and bursting with love, right? They're just all about democracy and flowers and hugging people, right? It just doesn't seem to make any real rational sense when you bullet point, for example, Kamala Harris's record.
Yeah.
You get called a racist.
Mm.
I mean, people get mad at you. You're a misogynist, racist. Like, no, she did these things. 40% of California state firefighters are prisoners because she did that. She was a human speed bump in San Francisco against the Archdiocese in San Francisco when they were investigating the Catholic Church for child abuse. As soon
No.
as she got elected San Francisco DA, she just just wedged her way right into that and stopped that entire thing. How is that good?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's it goes back to the left versus liberals thing. It's if your entire identity is based on getting a black woman as vice president, and you refuse to acknowledge the material conditions she has wrought for the people she has power over, that's a problem. Because if you were to call someone a racist for criticizing Kamala Harris's past and her background, there are very legitimate criticisms to be made there. And it's vastly more racist to ignore the realities of all of the lives that she has ruined, the families she's separated, the people she's put in prison, and the people she's kept in prison for no good reason.
Sure.
Just to brush that under the rug, that to me is a far greater betrayal than criticizing someone. I think that the race card, as a white guy, I don't have much room to speak on the issue, but I would be inclined to say that the material conditions of the people in the marching for Black Lives Matter, they know what they want. And for all of these pundit class people to say, you know what, we hear you, we're going to kneel in Kenta cloth and we are going to paint a street to say Black Lives Matter, and completely ignore the actual tangible demands that you have for, defunding the police and things like that.
Right.
That to me is the far greater betrayal.
Right. Well, and it seems to me there's no difference between the Biden brain and the Trump brain, right? I mean, I see evangelicals, well, we forgive him that grab him by the pussy or whatever he did, banging a chick while his wife was pregnant with their kid, real class act stuff.
Yeah.
That the evangelical community forgives because Jesus forgives. And then when you say, well, then I guess you could forgive Biden. Well, oh no, I can't do that. And then the Biden supporter, they forgive his sexual assaults. They forgive the wars he voted for. They forgive the crime bill, the Patriot Act. They forgive his voting for Scalia. They forgive, breaking his foot off in Anita Hill's ass. I saw that in real time.
Yeah.
And you're just like, and even though he didn't vote for Clarence Thomas, he sure as hell didn't, set it up for him to not be elected or selected, right? So it just seems like the two brains are about the same. They will forgive anything as long as, like you said earlier, it's your team winning.
Yeah, exactly. It's vote blue no matter who. And for the Republicans, it's we want the loudest, strongest, biggest, most hyperbolic guy that they can put in front of us. It's team sports. There's nothing left to it.
There's nothing left to it. And I don't know if you've ever read The Death of the Liberal Class by Chris Hedges.
Mm-mm.
You should read that book. I think you would dig it. And it's about 10 years ago it came out. I think I've read it maybe 4 or 5 times. And
yeah, I like Chris Hedges.
I like him a lot. And he'll get some gas for some things here and there, but for the most part, I think he's really a spot on. But that book really, he gets into the history of the liberal class in this country and then where it took its turn. And in that book, he makes a great point and kind of almost a joke. I laugh at it when I read it, but I don't think he meant it to be funny. But that Nixon was the last New Deal president that we had, because he had passed all these things. He passed OSHA and Title IX and the Cancer Act and, EPA and all these things. And, it's like, well, why did he do that? He was this, warhawk right-wing guy, because he was terrified of Ralph Nader and a real left.
Yeah.
Because every few weeks, Ralph Nader was on real TV, not, YouTube or whatever. He was on ABC and NBC, and he's talking about seatbelts and shatterproof glass, and we need OSHA, and we need this, that, and the other. And then there was a war protest going on that was significant. And so he was genuinely afraid of the left. So he passed all these things. And then when Watergate went down, he also alienated his right-wing buddies, because the left still didn't like him because of Vietnam. And then he alienated his right-wing buddies because of all these things that he did, they voted for. And yet we still, by the end of the 70s, the right wing had gotten completely co-opted by conservative Christians, because people forget that Ronald Reagan made abortion legal in California when he was governor. He signed that into law. And you're like, because they didn't care. Like, that's a bedroom issue. That's not our, there was almost a libertarian bent to it. It's like, well, if you want to do it or don't do it, that was their attitude. And then the Jerry Falwell came in. And it just seems like both of these sides, with the Biden brain and the Trump brain, are now just dyed in the wool with this team sports crap. And, if you bring up anything historical or anything kind of just that isn't like I'm some massive intellectual, you can look it up online now. It's not like before you had to go to the library and look this crap up on microfiche.
Yeah.
You could put 15 pages up on a Google search on just Kamala Harris, San Francisco Archdiocese blocked investigation. That'll get you 20 pages of Google stuff, right?
Yeah.
You could read 3 articles and get an idea of what's going on, right? I mean, you said earlier that you don't think, and kind of coming to the end of the show here, but you said earlier how you don't think this duopoly, this oligarch duopoly, is going to end anytime soon. What do you think, in your opinion? Because I've listened to a lot of your stuff, and you really have a handle on history and how it affects the present. And a lot of people, frankly, do not. And so, how do you see this changing? How do you see us really making a material change other than voting every 2 to 4 years?
Yeah, I think a lot of people hold up voting as, the purest thing they can do, this great civic duty. And there's nothing wrong with voting. It's, raise your hand every 4 years. It's not hard. Just go do it.
Right.
But I will say that we have no real democracy in this country. And a lot of people will say, well, it wasn't meant to be a democracy. It's a constitutional republic and all that stuff. Yeah. But what I mean is that the people have no real say in what gets done. We don't get to vote directly on issues. We don't get to elect our representatives directly. And when we do elect these people through our current institutions, our undemocratic institutions, they can completely ignore us. Like you see these policies that have 80% support among the general populace, and they never get passed. What gets passed is the things that Exxon wants, or Boeing wants, or Chase wants, things like that, things that have corporate support. And to me, just looking at history, there is no way to overcome this entrenched power without a popular movement from below. The people who actually do the work, like dock workers, truckers, things like that, the people who make this country run, literally, the people who ship things and bring things to place, if that gets shut down, if they strike, if they get the tiniest bit of class consciousness and realize, hey, we're being screwed and it's only going to get worse,
right?
They have incredible power to disrupt the machine that relies on them to keep it moving.
Right.
And that is the only way to get through to these massive corporations. You have to hit them in the wallet, because they don't care what you want. They only care, ever increasing profit. That's the goal of the capitalist system. And we've just fast tracked it in America so much that there will come a point when people realize, hey, you know what? These people, these socialists, these scary socialists are right. I can't afford healthcare. I can't afford rent. I can barely afford food. I can't afford childcare.
Right.
What is left? There's nothing for me to save. I can't save at all.
Right.
And so a lot of Americans are still comfortable enough to ignore it. But there will come a point, whether it's after another pandemic or, a financial crash or whatever, these things that are inherent to capitalism, there will come a point when the people have to realize this must change.
Right.
This is unsustainable.
Right. But isn't that the way we've gotten everything in this country? Women's right to vote, civil rights. I mean, it's never been, Calvin Coolidge or actually Woodrow Wilson didn't just say, yeah, I'm going to, give women the right to vote because I'm such a cool guy. It was decades of protest, right?
Right. No meaningful change is ever won through asking nicely. Everything has to come with a demand, an actual backed demand.
Right. And I think that was Bernie Sanders' problem, to be honest. Yeah. I think he thought, and I forgave him in 2016 when I thought, oh, cool. He sounds like he's changed a little bit, because I knew very little about him except for that he was this independent who always kind of voted with the Democrats.
Yep.
And I knew a couple things here and there, and I looked into it when he was kind of making a noise. I go, oh, well, maybe he changed, because he was getting these mass rallies, and I was like, okay. And then, like a 12-year-old, I watched the DNC convention in 2016, and I was waiting for my Al Pacino moment.
Yeah.
And this may predate you, but there was this not very good movie called And Justice for All, and Pacino plays this attorney around 1980-81. And the famous line in there is like, "You're out of order. This whole court's out of order." And they're dragging him out of the courtroom. It's the only good scene in the movie. The movie's kind of crappy. But I was waiting for that moment. I was waiting for him to walk up and go, it's clear that I got screwed. And Jill Stein has made me a generous offer. I'm going to take it up. She's on every ballot in the United States. And I'm going to run for president on that. And then I was waiting for him to do that.
Yeah.
And then he didn't. And then he let the DNC take his email list, and, Robbie Mook or whoever wrote everybody, okay, stand down, everybody behave. We got to be unified. We're going to, elect a baggage-laden war criminal asshole, but hey, you're going to have to take it and suck it up because you got nowhere to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, that just seems to be, what what we do. And unless a major change, unless we actually have boots on the ground, as it were, I don't think there's going to be a major change. Like Bernie Sanders tried it in 2016. He tried to play nice. And then instead of motivating or mobilizing his people to actually do something, he didn't. He just capitulated. And then he did it again this time. And left behind, I mean, how do you endorse a guy who's antithetical to everything you say you believe in? The full 180.
Oh yeah, it was incredibly disappointing for me and for a lot of socialists and other leftists in this country. It's like he was the one guy who kind of sort of talked the walk and all that stuff. But I think what these last two election cycles have shown is that you can't rely on single politicians,
right.
Like it's like great man theory. Like you can't rely on one dude to come and save us. Mm-hmm. We have to organize outside of electoral politics and just build other power structures that can compete in a way that actually makes people's voices heard. And that's really basically the whole point of my channel since last March is I'm trying to get across to people that if you want something, you gotta organize and you gotta work for it. You can't just be complacent and hope to vote for the next Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. There probably won't be for a while.
Right.
So it's not something we can just sit idly by. And so many people have access to YouTube now that figure it might as well try to educate some people. And you never know, something might stick.
Yeah, you never know. Hey, so listen, in wrapping up a couple things. I want to talk about your other streaming services that you're using to promote your show and the show of other creators. Is this something you invented yourself, or with some collaborators, or what's up with that?
Yeah. So Nebula is a streaming platform that a lot of us work together in a group called Standard, which is a group of educational, or pseudo educational YouTubers. And a lot of us were having the same trouble of we couldn't make a lot of the things we wanted to make without risking being demonetized or our channel suffering due to how the algorithm works if we were to put those videos on YouTube. So we're like, why don't we make our own thing? Like other people have streaming platforms, so let's give it a shot. And so the guy who runs Standard had a background in app development, and so he brought some people on and we tested some things out, and we put it up. And it was small for a while, and now we've got, I think, 100 different YouTubers that are routinely posting content to Nebula. And so we put stuff there ad-free, and we can put whatever we want up there without the fear of demonetization and stuff like that. So it's nice, and it's a good place where you can go where the information is generally trustworthy and well sourced and all that stuff. And that was that was the idea for us, just an alternative to YouTube. Nice.
Well, hey, listen, man. I'm gonna have your links to the show and everything in the body of the show, and I know you got to get going here too. But I really appreciate you coming on, man. It's been like I said, I fell into you, I think, on accident. It was you had this really great clip. It was about the COVID protests, and you had this, and your stuff is so well sourced. That's what I really appreciate about it. Like you can actually pause it and Google it yourself and go, "Hey, oh, okay, the Door Brothers are doing this," and you kind of, and it's just really, it's very sober. And and not boring. It's like if Joe Rogan and Jimmy Dore had a baby. It's like it's good stuff. And like I said, it doesn't take a whole long, 10 to 15 minutes. It just goes by so quick. It's very enjoyable stuff. So, folks, my guest has been JT Chapman. He's the host and creator of Second Thought, and you can catch his show on YouTube as well, as in addition to Nebula and all the other streaming services that they're associated with. And again, guys, if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.